afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending this last session on Thursday afternoon at the end of the conference. I really appreciate you all coming along and not taking a break and coming here to hear, I guess, my story about ServiceNow and not only the journey, to use that term, but also the revolution that it caused in our team with regards to service management and the way we work. So we are going to talk a bit about not only how we've moved from being an IT service provider to a business service provider, but also how within our team we had to reevaluate the roles, the actual job descriptions and functions that the people completed day to day, and then Agile crept into the way that we work. So we're going to talk a little bit about how that happened, and that's where the revolution came in. Service management having to absorb Agile ways of working in a way that we had never done before. So I'm going to talk about those few different aspects today. Oh, I better do the housekeeping. I do apologise. Please silence all of your devices. There is a survey that you can do at the end, and I would really appreciate your feedback if you have time to do that, whether it's via the portal or the paper copies outside. And please hold questions to the end, it says. I don't mind if you do want to ask something in between or at the end, so just let me know. All right. So I've just done a little bit of an introduction, but our humble beginnings, stepping out of our traditional service management role, coping with rapid change. And when I say rapid, it wasn't that it happened overnight, but it really snuck up on us. So talking about how when you're so busy doing day-to-day work, suddenly you realise all this change has happened around you in the way that you work, and you've suddenly got to plan forward. So we're going to talk a bit about what happened there. Our approach to working and how we've incorporated Agile practices, and not just into our technology team within service management, but also with the work practices of some of our process practitioners and the benefits we've gotten there. And the new world of, even for me, and I put Agile with a small a and not a capital because I was one of the people who was a little bit scared of it when it first came on board. But talking about the approach and how that you can adopt it without going the whole hog, without going the full way, but by cherry picking the bits that you need to help make things work within whatever your environment is. My environment, heavily regulated, so we had to be careful about being too agile, just enough. So, all right. Okay, so a little bit about me. I've been working in service management for 20 years now, and I can definitely say to you that it is one of my 3 passions. I didn't know when I walked into IT what that was going to be for me. I started off in a service desk and support role. Along the way, I've worked in a number of process roles, problem management, change management. I've been a service delivery manager in managed services. 5 years as service management consultant, working with customers and many big implementations. And then finally, I've gone back into the customer side, and for the last 2 years, well, it'll be 2 years in 2 weeks' time, I went into Tabcorp to manage their service management process and technologies team. So my other 2 passions are roller derby, which is what I do when I'm not doing service management, and it helps me to expend some of that extra energy or frustration that I may have at the end of a given day, and I love. So my team is the Witches of East Vic, and so Eastern Victoria in Australia. And my other passion, of course, is my family, and that is a very recent game of Giant Jenga that we played. And it's okay, the children moved away before my husband pulled the last block out, which that shot was before the last one, and the whole thing came tumbling down. And I took that photo because we were all a bit nervous, but we went further than we'd ever gone before in this game, and everyone was excited. In fact, my youngest there at one point was wearing her roller skating and bike riding helmet as she pulled the blocks out just in case one came tumbling down. So let me tell you about Tabcorp, who I'm working for. They are an entertainment and media company, so that is horse wagering, sports betting, Keno, Sky Racing, so they the media associated with that. They're the biggest company in Australia. We have about 3,000 employees and many more thousands of venues than that. 3,000 of our own venues, just TAB, but otherwise also at pubs and clubs and other places. All right. So why we needed to change. I can talk to you a bit about what happened at Tabcorp before I walked in the door, and I did know people who worked there, so I had been hearing about it firsthand before I stepped in. And that is that they had one of what was the big 3 or 4 service management tools that was being sold around, very common in Australia at the time, and it was cumbersome. It was technically very challenging. In fact, they didn't even have an internal administrator. They always used a third-party consultant. So it was expensive. They had to plan and justify every change they wanted to make because they knew it was going to cost them money and it was going to take time to do, and then hopefully they could really get what they wanted at the end. So when they looked at what is this delivering for us, well, things slowly, expensively, and they weren't really getting the outcomes that they wanted, was the answer. So they knew that after their last upgrade on that tool that took a year to deliver, and between $1 and $5 million expense to deliver, and they still weren't 100% satisfied with what they got, that it was time to change. So the service management manager at the time built a little business case based on an estimated 150 to 200 users, and got ServiceNow in the door. Okay, so implementing ServiceNow at Tabcorp. I came on board, as I said, about 3 months after this happened, and when I first interviewed, they were literally just implementing. So I knew that I was going to be walking in off the back of a fresh ServiceNow implementation, baseline of modules, and that was a part of what excited me about the job. I had been consulting, I had many large implementations, but most recently, before I took the Tabcorp job, I had been involved in an aggressive 3-month implementation at our National Postal Service. And when I saw what was possible in 3 months across such a large organisation, I was really excited about going into one where I would be managing that team and what we might be able to do there. So it was a part of the appeal. I knew this was happening. So, sorry, it's difficult for me to look at the screens from up here, so I do apologise. I keep walking back over here. So I've talked about the full users that they started with. The basic modules are up on the screen. So incident request, problem, change and config. This was a like-for-like implementation. I'm sure you hear that all the time, but what we mean by that was they picked up our data, our venues, our configuration items, categories, you name it, and just put them down over here. So there was no cleansing of that data where there'd been poor processes and controls and they'd had tools that they said didn't support them around change management and so forth. Ooh. I didn't press the button. Uh-oh. I think we have a technical difficulty. There's something in English but then in other languages on my screen that I don't speak, and now it's gone. Okay. Sorry, I was pre-warned that they had earlier had difficulty with this laptop, so I do apologise. It's restarting itself. I think it is. Sorry, I know, I think she's getting some help. Sorry, so where was I? I was talking about the base modules. What it didn't have up on there was that they also implemented a basic knowledge management function as well. And this was really important because we rolled it out to IT, but also to one business group at that early stage. So the real focus was IT, but we had a business group called the Service Support Centre, and they take all the traffic from our venues about whether they're having IT problems with our Sky TVs or satellites, if there are suspicious people at the venues doing things that they're concerned about, whether it's gaming machines or otherwise. So they take all of those calls from the venues, and they were, from day one, logging those incidents and requests into ServiceNow. They started using the knowledge module. They created their own knowledge team very quickly because they have quite a high rotation shift workforce, so handover is quite difficult. And they are currently now running with between 500 and 1,000 knowledge articles, and many staff from that group who've moved into other parts of the business who were not only advocates of how easy it was to use compared to their previous tool, but have invited us into business units because they've said, we know the tool that can fix our problem when they've been, transferred on. So I mention that because they're a really important part of the story, that user group. Sorry, I'll flick through. Okay. All right, so the evolution. So this was that part of where things crept up on us. We were really busy. We had one developer, and he was a really smart resource off our service desk. We have found many diamonds in the rough there, but this particular guy was doing his own software management university degree, and we knew he had some coding smarts and other things there we hadn't taken advantage of. He was highly intelligent, customer focused, and he was a really great person for us to move into this role. He picked it up really quickly. And as a result of his responsiveness to customers, and when they reported issues, him hearing what else they were really wanting, what else was really upsetting them, he started to do enhancements and say, hey, what do you think about this? I've done it in a pre-prod. Would this help you based on what you were saying? I've not only fixed your issue, but he was going a bit further because he could. It was so easy. And we found very quickly his queues started to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and in some cases a little uncontrolled. So I have to say, in those early days when we weren't all focused on ServiceNow and what it can do, things started flooding in formally and informally, and he was really busy. And in fact, we had to say to him, hey, slow down, you don't have to work as hard. And he'd say, oh yeah, and he'd go home, and I'd come in the next day and say, you were working at home again. I can tell, I see what you're doing. He said, yeah, but people want this stuff and I can do it. And so even he was having trouble switching off because it was so easy and he was so excited. It got to a point though where the business requests started coming in, we actually needed to control them better because he also wanted to be implementing change quickly in our change environment, and based on our current processes, he couldn't do that. So he was getting frustrated, we were getting frustrated, but also he's a technical guy. He wasn't capturing all of the requirements clearly so that when us as management wanted to look at them and see what he was really doing, that it was clearly there in black and white for us. But also so we could make those validation decisions about whether it's the right thing to do for everybody who's a stakeholder in that module, not just that one person asking. So it all kind of rapidly took off to a point where we realised we had so much to do, we weren't keeping up, we weren't managing our stakeholders as well as we'd like. And we had to make some change. So it evolved quickly, but in a really positive way. Our customers were excited, we were excited, our developers excited, but hang on, let's get some control here, but still be flexible. So let me show you some of the things that we implemented. So up here, just to explain this slide, IT services will be our traditional IT services to the customer. Corporate services are really business services, but what we call corporate services are the people in our business who service other people in our business so they can deliver to our end customer. So we're talking about our HR, our finance groups, our commercial team, our legal team, all of these sorts of guys. And then when I say business services here, we're talking about services delivered to our end customers, just so you can see the difference. So this was the first bundle that we delivered. Okay, so this was the core implementation. And then we moved into self-service. So we created our first couple of self-service forms, which were the basic things of being able to log an incident and a request from here, so you didn't have to phone the service desk. Basic fields, goes into the service desk queue, they pick it up, either resolve it or assign it on. So that was actually a really great win, and also another way for us to start promoting to people what we could do. And even based on that, we started to get an influx of form requests. Tabcorp's a really big paper form organisation. We've made a dent on that, but we'll keep going. There's a lot more to do. On this bottom left-hand side, you'll see CARF, Computer Access Request Form. So this was one of those things that my process analyst and my developer worked in their spare time, and sometimes quite late, over months to verify and then develop 17 pages of requesting access to different systems in our organisation with the dependent information boxes and otherwise that you needed. And yes, we printed it, signed it, scanned it, sent it on. 17 pages every time. And imagine how many people and different systems that was. And when it got to the service desk, they had to open that attachment, look at how many different records would be required, and attach that form to each one of those records that they would raise and assign off to that group to provision. So it was particularly cumbersome, and we heard complaints. So we decided to do this as a value add, early days promotional thing, even though, as I said, it took months to do. And it was an amazing result. I think resulted in Jeff even getting a Legends Award in our organisation. That's our either on the spot or quarterly award for people going above and beyond, due to the many hours of effort saved by both the people in the business trying to deliver to our customers and for us as IT to try and manage that. It also made our auditors, of which we have many, really happy about the way we could now audit access provision and who has access. Let's go on to the next bundle, where we started working on integrations to monitoring systems, automatically logging incidents and assigning them to teams, us integrating with regulator portals where we have to report certain activities. So instead of it getting entered in one place in ServiceNow and then going to another portal and entering it there for our regulators, it automatically passes that through, gets the response, and we can track it in one place. So all kinds of integrations there. I'm going to talk more about the other corporate services in a minute. Let's let it build. Over on the far right-hand side, you'll see business services. So this was about a year and a half ago where there was a project in our field services business, and that is the field support staff who go out to venues, the pubs and clubs, and service either the ticketing machines for the wagering bets, the gaming machines for those venues, the Sky TVs, satellites, etc. So field services, but for the business. They were using a lot of dynamic databases, which we found to be Excel spreadsheets. They kept saying, oh, we've got dynamic databases, and we're like, what are they? And it wasn't what we thought. It was lots of Excel to run their business. And they had been for 18 months trying to get a project off the ground to replace those databases and one actual system that wasn't custom built for them and didn't meet their needs that they were using. And they couldn't get it approved. Every time they built up the business case and they thought they'd selected someone, it didn't come through. It didn't make sense. The value wasn't there. Luckily for us, the BA, who was a part of that team, had spoken to someone who mentioned ServiceNow, someone from the service centre, who said, we're already logging all these things in here, and then they get cut and pasted and transferred into the other systems, and they're managed somewhere else, and they just tell us when it finishes. Why aren't we doing it all in ServiceNow? And they said, oh, can it asset manage as well? Well, probably, let's go and ask them. And that was the first meeting I had. So it was about 4 months in at Tabcorp, and I had a project manager and some business people and a BA sit down and say, is this possible? And can we create barcodes and scan them straight into ServiceNow? And I said, sure we can. We can do anything. And I called my partner and said, please tell me, surely someone has done that, right? Yes. They said, of course we can do it. Of course we can do that. So we then ran a whole lot of workshops with them and helped them to define their processes. No wonder they couldn't get these other things up and running. They hadn't even defined what all the processes were. We worked with them using our service management expertise around incident and request IMAC management and asset and config to help them understand what they really need and how they would then need to update that. So ongoing, what would those processes look like and what roles would they need to deliver them? They were really excited. They hadn't had that level of engagement before, and certainly not from service management, who they were like, we don't even really know what you do. We're just glad that you're here, right? So I'm going to talk a bit more about what we delivered in that project, but in a slide or two. It was a really lucky opportunity for us. Car park management system, we'll chat about in a minute as well. So that's now a customer, our facilities group, who was so excited with what we did with visitor self-service check-in And with what we did for them for the building access request management, they said, oh, could you help us do this too? And I said, does it involve a form and a process? Of course we can. So we're building that now. All right, let's talk about those corporate services and what these things actually are. So OH&S contractor management. This was a case where our OH&S department, who aren't heavily funded, they're not a revenue generating business unit, said, we've got, $50,000 and we need a solution for managing the contractor information here. We're concerned about the risk and exposure because we don't have enough staff to manage and understand if all the contractors coming on site nationally for us have got current certificates of currency, liability insurance. We're not sure that all of our contract controllers in the business are doing the right spot checks because we're managing it all in spreadsheets and we don't have time to chase them all the time. We feel like there could be a real exposure here. We've got some funding, we just haven't been able to find the right solution. So we said to them, well, yes, we can definitely build this for you. It's, again, some forms, some workflow, some notifications that go externally. People can just reply back to those, the contractors with their attachments, and it'll become attached to their record and all of these things, even without them having access. So we did get a little bit of money from them for third-party consultant help, which we do whenever we need, they want something quickly and we don't have time. It's usually not expertise, it's usually time. And within 2 months, we'd helped them to find the process. We had a partner come in and just build that for us because of time, but then our BAU guys, our developers, then did the updates through the UAT testing and training and so forth, and we rolled that out for them. So in essence, we've saved them about $25,000 to $35,000 of capital expenditure that they can put into something else, built it internally, and they are thrilled. We found that there were many, many core suppliers who have many contractors who hadn't provided current information, and they can automatically generate reports, notifications, you name it, capture it and all manage it there. That was a really exciting thing again for our risk and audit people too. Commercial contracts management. If you want a contract with a new supplier in IT, you will enter it through the form in the service catalogue. It will go through all the relevant approvals. Anytime somebody asks a question as an approver, the rest of the approvers get to see that and the answer. If there's any updates to the document, you also receive that automatically out of the system. Those contracts, once they're completed through their lifecycle workflow, those forms become a record. So we have master services agreements, we have statements of work attached to those as they come in, so that we've got a central database now for all of our IT contracts. I must say that they didn't back enter all of them out of the spreadsheets, so the smaller ones, they said as renewals come up, we'll manage and enter, so they didn't do it for everything, they did it for some. But they now also have automated milestone reminders. So I'm sure many of you have that where you agree to a milestone on a contract, but someone's got to remember when that is. They don't have to remember anymore. Renewals, we get notified before. It's a really nice place for those guys to be. They'd also been investigating other really expensive solutions, and we did this in maybe a month for them, a little bit more because of the user testing and training and the availability of people. Capital expenditure application. I approved 3 weeks ago ITIL licence for our CEO because he wants to go in and look at the capital expenditure requests that he's approving. He was otherwise getting them by email and he just had to hit approve or reject, as a result of this. But anybody who wants to spend money, the whole approval life cycle is now captured. It goes all the way through to the finance team. They're managing that. We haven't integrated to Oracle, which is actually the system that provisions the money for us. That's probably due to cost at the moment, but they enter in the associated reference number from Oracle, so we've got the tracking and we're managing it there. And the finance team has recently come to us and said there's a whole lot of other forms as well that aren't as complex as this one. This one was quite complex, that they want to manage through there, and very senior people in our organisation are now getting visibility and use of ServiceNow. Building access management kind of speaks for itself, applying for different types and levels of access, data centre, floors in buildings, you name it, for our core sites. And suspicious persons and case management. So I guess within our industry, there are bad people out there who want to do bad things with regards to gambling and fraud and otherwise. And so those things are reported through our customer care centre. We have an investigations unit We are able to now in ServiceNow store photos from the security systems of those venues, of those suspicious people. They build cases and store the information that they eventually take to the police to then go out and get warrants and otherwise and deal with things in the court case. So it's really just incident management for a different part of the business and then ongoing management of that. So they have whole files, which are really just a problem with a whole lot of incident records as such associated, and they manage that in a completely siloed, confidential version of an incident module in essence for them. Self-service check-in. So this is a really visible win for us. So anyone who comes into our Melbourne or Sydney head offices who is a visitor or a contractor signs in here. Just ask them for their name, their organisation, who they're visiting, and their mobile and email, so we can chase them up later in case they don't return their pass. When you hit submit, it automatically sends a notification via email and SMS if we've got your phone in our system, and tells you your visitor has arrived. So security doesn't have to phone anymore. It prints out the label, and our security people do still currently, though, hand the pass over with visitor access provided. If you're a contractor, you might need more access than that to go to a certain floor or normally secure area, so that's why security still has that role. But otherwise, they don't have to do anything else at the front desk. If you're a contractor, we've linked this up to the OH&S contractor manual. If your certificates aren't current, you don't get in. So fortunately, we'd already created this other module, and when we got this request, we went, hang on a minute. These things should be talking to each other. So when we built the self-service, we connected it. So the business is really excited about that and limiting exposure. They also now record in here whether or not you've done induction. So instead of the old paper logbook for signing in and a separate one for induction, security can already see if you've done induction because a record appears on their screen when you submit and sign in, and they don't worry you about it. They only ask you if they can see induction hasn't been ticked as your thing prints out. So there's been some really great efficiencies there at both of those sites based on this. This is our Melbourne desk. So another, the business service achievement around that asset and inventory management. So replacing those spreadsheets, that business, the gaming services, field services business, they're now able to track all inventory and assets coming in and out of their warehouse. So what this means for them is that they're actually able to make real business decisions based on their assets. What was happening previously was they were getting asked about writing off asset information, and they honestly didn't know. They didn't know the answers of where it was for some of it and what was happening with it, and they were making large dollar decisions about agreeing to write things off when they weren't really sure. Everything that comes in and out of those warehouses is now barcoded. The consumables have min-max levels where they get alerts, and it automatically triggers a job if we need to order more of something when it hits that minimum. They are truly able to account for their assets, and they're even able to plan on plan. So when it talks about down the bottom here, product planning report, what that is that the people who are working the relationships with the customer, our BDMs and our planning people, can look at a certain venue. They can look at the current work orders that might be open for making changes to that venue, putting in new configuration items or making changes to them. They can then look at that forecasted current state. So they can press a button and see a report that says, in 6 months, based on the work you've planned, this is what it'll look like instead of just what it looks like today. And they can plan on that plan. So imagine what you could do with that with IT. We've all talked about it for a long time, but they can actually look at the future state that we're planning and then say, okay, if I want to plan on top of that, what do I need to do? How does that look? So that they're doing that kind of work now. They're able to look at their SLAs and performance in ways they haven't before. And recently one of the senior managers, oops, sorry, I flicked too far. The senior manager said to me that he was walking into negotiations with one of the major chains that they deal with, and he knew they wanted higher service levels. Only now he walks in knowing not only what we meet today, but what they can meet. So he can be informed about that as well. So he was really excited. He's never seen that before, and he's been in the business 20 years. All right. So that's Damien, our warehouse manager, who may be much to your surprise, but was one of our champions in this implementation. So forward-thinking. He was very embarrassed to me in that photo that I had up there. But he was amazing in making it all successful in going through the audits that were needed to have accurate data so that going forward we really were on top of things. All right. With great power comes great responsibility. This was something I said to our administrator one day when he was talking about his frustration and there's so much that he could do and why can't he just do it now? And we were delivering all these outcomes, and I'm very outcome focused, so it was really easy for me to go, oh, somebody wants something, yep, let's get on it, and how do we make that happen? And kind of miss some of that big picture of we've got to make change to our ways of working. I was so like, this is fun, this is great, we're delivering. And I realised, hang on, we're going to start to maybe breach process. If we don't keep this up, we're going to get frustrated users. This is going to stop being so much fun if I'm dealing with complaints and backlog and these other things. And it was kind of what I was saying to Jeff to try and rein in his capability and enthusiasm. I said, hang on, we need to take stock. You know, we have a responsibility to do this right, to implement quality outcomes every time, to think about all of our stakeholders. We can't just say yes without looking at all of this holistically, especially when we had so many modules now with different user groups using them. You couldn't just take one person's request and implement it, even if they wanted it, just in case it affected other people. So we had this wonderful service now, fast, low cost to change, easy to upgrade, fantastic for administrators to come in even where they didn't have experience before and really quickly pick it up and become effective. So all these good things, but we had to make some changes in our team. Oh, I must have pressed too hard. Let me just show you. So when I came into the team, I want to just talk a bit about the makeup and the roles. It was a little bit of a mismatch, right? It was the result of a few restructures, some IT departments coming together, some people leaving and their roles not really being filled. They hadn't gotten justified to refill them. And I had an unusual, in some cases, combinations of roles working together. I didn't want to walk in day one and just make change for the sake of it. So I was looking at what our commitments were, and as I worked through that, got to know the people and found that I had a few different categories of people to work with. I had a whole lot of new people in roles who'd been placed in roles in the last few months who didn't have the skills. They needed to be developed so that they could deliver what we needed. So it was great that there were internal opportunities, but they hadn't been upskilled and given, you know, the tools they needed to do their job. I had some people who were grumpy, fed up, and other things that we needed to either get them on board with the exciting change and things we're about to do, or help them to realise maybe there's somewhere else that they could do that. And there was a combination of those things. I have to say one of my biggest champions today is someone who I thought would be gone within a year, and 2 years later is kicking goals that I never imagined. He turned it around. There were some others who I helped to realise their own destinies. So, unfortunately for me, we empowered them enough, they made their own decision. But it took a bit of building them up to get to those choices. And then there's some of the other guys where I had to actually look at their role descriptions and say, it's either not right for them, but also it's not right for the team. For where we're going, I'm going to need to change some roles, but I want to keep this person. They're a good person. They've got potential to fulfill what we really need, but I'm going to have to talk them through that change without them feeling like they're not, you know, they're the issue, because it really was just the wrong role. So that was where we started. Oh, I just pressed the buttons too hard. I do apologise. So this is where we are today. We have a service desk manager who is focused on customer focus. He's also a really smart tools guy. So we're getting the most out of the tool for the service desk, and we're doing lots of little enhancements, improvements for them to improve the way that they work. They're actively using knowledge. There's all kinds of exciting things that are happening in that service desk space. I don't have a continual improvement manager anymore. I have a performance improvement manager. What am I called? Service improvement and performance manager. And so that person's looking after our service level management, which is also our supplier performances and following our supplier process. Underneath there, I have process analysts. So what we were really missing was we had a few different process analyst roles when I came on board, but they were really busy in BAU. And I didn't actually have people developing processes, reviewing processes, looking at what we do with those skills. So we found one internally, and we morphed another really productive person into one. And they are today my pipeline for ServiceNow and other improvement change. When a customer says they want something that's more than a field change, my process analysts go out and meet with them. They're very customer friendly. If the process isn't defined, they document it and say, is this what you just said to me? And we refine it until it is. And then we say, now what are you looking for? And they capture all of those requirements. And then they bring it to my ServiceNow developers and say, here's what the customer wants. So that my developers aren't having to spend all their time understanding this stuff. Of course, they have to get involved in meetings, and my process analysts need to know when is it the right time to bring the developer in. Oh, this is one that's beyond me, and maybe it's early. Or no, I can run with this and hand it over later. So, we certainly had a teething period around that. But that's a really dynamic team that works closely with my service management technologies team. In the technologies team, I also have an identity management specialist, so we have SailPoint. So our onboarding for our core systems is automated through SailPoint. Our Oracle personnel system says, yep, somebody's been approved. Overnight, SailPoint creates their AD accounts, their Exchange accounts, intranet, Oracle accesses, all of that happens. They're automatically put into ServiceNow as an employee. And if there are certain other things to do with their role, accesses they need, it'll trigger tickets in ServiceNow. And similarly, when they're offboarded in our HR system, a contract end date or somebody is let go, overnight it triggers that in SailPoint. It'll log tickets into ServiceNow if you've requested any access via a CAF and send it off to those groups to say, hey, this person has left the organisation. In the next week, you need to confirm with their manager and remove their account. So jobs are automatically triggered. It's all linked together. And that's part of what's so exciting about having these technologies in the one group is it makes integration planning simpler. And the last of the roles there, we're just taking on board Splunk into our team, which is for dashboarding and monitoring. And we're also in the process of integrating that with the project as well. So we're going to have a whole lot of service technology teams working together, and hopefully then we're also choosing the right solutions when customers come to us for what needs to do what. Just recently I got asked to do something in ServiceNow that I said we could do it, but it's not ServiceNow's core purpose. But you know what? Splunk would be the right tool for that, and that's coming in shortly. So if it's not urgent today, we'll wait and do that. If it's urgent today, I'll do it anyway, but it's not going to stay in ServiceNow, because even though it can, it's not the right thing. It was really about notifications. It wasn't about workflows or forms. That's not its bread and butter. Let's have a look at that. So we're hoping together as a team we can help to make right decisions on solutions as a whole. Change and release stayed the same. Problem management has really matured in our organisation now and grown, in fact, to the point where we've also got a problem and capacity analyst I'm hiring at the moment. And I inherited our service continuity and business continuity manager out of another team over this period. So that's the model. Let's talk about the ways of working. So we sat down, and I thought this was going to be an easy meeting. I thought we should be done in an hour, maybe an hour and a half. Wasn't the case. I sat down with my change manager, who's very flexible. I sat down with my technologies team manager and my developer. I said, okay, guys, we've got to really look at our process. It's not flexible enough. We need to be able to do things more quickly. We're hiring a second ServiceNow administrator. We need to prepare for this. What can we do so we can be more responsive and fill some of the gaps that we have now? Sorry, our process analyst was there as well. So I started talking release management, change management, flexibly, of course, and fast. But my tools manager started talking agile. And he started to say things like stories. And I read stories to my children at bedtime, right? So every time he said it, I'm like golden book. You know, that's just kept visually, I'm very visual. I kept imagining it, and I just said to him, and he's talking in language that I didn't understand. And we both drew on the board, and I really feel bad for everyone else who was there. We were drawing on the board, and I thought, I think he's kind of drawing what I'm drawing, but it's different. And so after an hour and a half, and we were all mentally exhausted, we said, let's meet again. In a week, I'm like, how is this not happening? I'm really frustrated. This is my own team. All right. We met again a week later, and I think we kind of moved forward a little. And it wasn't until I walked out of that meeting, and reflection's a wonderful thing, that I realised that the challenges I've had with service management over the years and trying to get people to talk ITIL and service management was exactly what was happening with him trying to get me to accept and understand some agile. My experience consulting had been that a lot of people were using waterfall and agile and so forth as a way to not commit. Not to deliver, oh, we'll see what we can do in the next 2 weeks. Oh, we've shifted it out again. And I looked at it, and so I was really scared about the controls and the other things that wouldn't be there if we took that approach. And it took a couple of sessions and that frustration for me to realise my own biases that I hadn't really recognised that I had in place. So it was quite a journey for me personally. So we had those sessions. We got a bit frustrated. I said to him, do me one favour, just don't say stories. Say requirements. Talk about enhancements, features, any other thing. Just help me to get past that. You can use all the other terms, but just let's remove that from the equation. I said, let's go back to focusing on outcomes, because then I'll really hear you and understand you. And then we'll talk about specific tasks, and I'll understand how you're going to deliver it. And then I actually left it with him. So I realised I needed to step back. This wasn't my area of expertise anymore. If we're going to integrate Agile into service management, I'm a service management person. Always felt I was very open and innovative in the service management space, but this is new territory for me, and I've got someone who's confidently talking about it. I need to step back and let him take this on and put something out there and show me that it can actually deliver like he's saying he believes it can. So we met together and agreed what those high-level outcomes that were really important to us were going to be out of this. Basically, we needed to sustain what we had already. We needed it to be available and stable, but we needed to implement some ways of doing things more quickly. But I wanted structure too. So I said to him, let's have release windows. Maybe fortnightly, we agreed, and at a time appropriate for not impacting the business. We had weekly, we created or implemented weekly Scrum meetings. We had a different name for them, where I would sit down and help with the prioritisation because I'm out there talking with the business all the time. Darren would be there as a Scrum Master running this meeting, making sure also that the technical resources were right and weren't overcommitting. The technical developers are in there. They're saying, here's what's in my queue from BAU, as well as what's coming down the pipeline. And my process analyst would say, I've got these things ready for you this week, but this other stuff's coming. It's not ready yet, but I'm giving you context, so when it arrives, you already know about it. So we started to implement some things. We talked about those outcomes there, and one of them was better manage customer expectations, because what we'd realised was we had had a number of miscommunications around who was communicating with the customer, with the different roles, that there were a couple of times where we got caught out there. So that was also one of the points that we said we need to make sure that's clear. Whatever we do and when we decide to do it, exactly who is communicating back to the customer. So it was one of certainly our lessons. As I was getting more comfortable, Darren did this. He was my tools manager. He started doing things that we had been doing with service management into other IT groups in the business, almost by stealth, starting to implement some of the practices into his team. So I started to see tangible results without even realising they were already doing them. Until they started sticking post-it notes up on the window, and then I knew they were doing it, right? I knew that they were doing a bit of Agile. It became clear. But I was really impressed because he started to talk to me about outcomes instead of just using all the other terms. He started actually doing this so I could see the tangible results, like we would do for other people who weren't supportive of problem management or knowledge or bringing our digital team into change, who are all Agile. They're the whole way. We're just part of the way. And then he showed me this slide, and this was what really sold me. Part of it, what sold me was, though, that he knew what he was doing. He said, I'm not trying to do everything. This is Agile's value proposition. Maybe you don't understand that, but the ones that I've highlighted or the ones that are in the larger font, these are the things that I'm targeting. I'm not trying to do everything. He said to me, I'm actually just trying to do these things first, and once I've achieved those things, I'm going to focus on more, which is exactly what I do with service management when I say to people, we're going to start here with these focuses, and once we've made some ground there, let's try and do the other things. Don't bite everything off at once, right? And I thought, oh my goodness, he's doing these things. This is fantastic. I'm on board. Your approach is right. Let's give this a go, right? So this is their board of work. Let me tell you that what's on there, I know it looks it's not as impressive as some other photos that I've seen in presentations today, but it not only talks about the chunks of workload for our developers, our process analysts that are working in an agile way are also on there. So what happened was, in my tools team for a while, there were some process roles, and Darren wasn't going to half manage the team this way. And what's happened is I've got people in non-development jobs now being accountable for their work with their team every week. In asset management, it wasn't always clear to me what our analyst was doing and what actual outcomes, because it's big work, right? It's not really regular deliverable type work. He's doing accuracy of data and all this kind of work, and it wasn't always clear, and sometimes it left you wondering. He now stands up there every day with his peers and talks about what I'm doing today and what I'm achieving by tomorrow and what I'm going to do over the next week. And we've got our process people also being as accountable for their deliverables, where they don't have lots of ticket traffic coming into their queues, you know, where it's not as easy. Standing up there and working with the tools guys, we can all understand what's important to each other, and they work through that for like 15 minutes each morning. They get up on the board. Also, what's up there is our environments management. I know there's a better way, we will get to it, but so we know of the things that are being developed, which environments they are in, and what's happening. It's just a visual. I'm hoping, after I saw another presentation today, we're going to move to task boards and things. I've got some ideas. There's a glint in my eye. I hope the guys are as excited as I am when we get back. So, the Scrum module. They said to me, we should be using the Scrum module in ServiceNow. And I said, how? Why? What benefits are we going to get? So, they've partially implemented that today. Again, a presentation I saw today, I can now see the end game. So they are doing enhancements in here where it's longer pieces of work, but the little pieces are still sitting just as requests in their support queue. But I think if we can get on to using those visual task boards again, we can put it up so it's more visible to customers and use it as a comms tool. And I will be getting them to use everything. At the moment, we still have our Scrum meeting with minutes, and then they take it back and update it. And I thought, oh, why are we doing that? So our next week's meeting, I'm going to make sure they bring the laptop in and let's update it real time as we're going straight into the records. So we've still got some room to improve there. We are progressing in that space. I asked Darren about what his tips were for everybody for implementing Agile. I thought he was the expert on this rather than me. I think if you were to ask me, I would say, let's sort out the language early, just so we're on the same page. It would just clear up some of that frustration in workshopping and communications along the way. And I would just say also, be open, start with the outcomes. We actually just dived into the process, because I'm also pretty process-driven because of my background, and we missed starting at the outcomes we wanted, and we probably wasted a little bit of time and frustration there as well. Darren said, be clear on why. Still start with outcomes and process. Don't start with what the tool can do, because we can make the tool do anything that we want. Start small. What's in a name? That's his way of saying talk the same language. I really agree. That was something that I just got stuck on early, much to my own surprise. Get the runs on the board, and whether that is completely visible and upfront at first, or whether that's just getting started and trying some things, that's okay. Show governance and controls, depending on what's required in your organisation, whether it's regulatory, whether it's policies, whether it's based on commitments to your customers in contracts. Be clear on what those things are, and if you're going to take on this agile approach, make sure you can still deliver those things and keep your auditors happy. Don't forget that. Prove that agile is more than 6 shooters. That was something I said to him. I said to him, every time you're talking to me like this, I'm like, show me there's still going to be some control, some visibility, these other things, which they have. They've demonstrated that, so now I believe it. And practice, practice, practice. And by that we mean try some things, evolve, don't be afraid to change again. With whatever you start with, you know, our meetings were too far apart initially, and we realised then that because we weren't making decisions regularly enough, it put more pressure on our developers. They were starting to make decisions about what was important because there was longer gaps between those Scrum meetings, and they were feeling pressure and sometimes making the wrong decision about what they should develop next. They just look in the queue and they go, I could do that and that's interesting. And we'd finish the fortnight and they'd say, oh, and I delivered these other things. I'd say, why'd you do that? These other things are more important. So we actually went down to a week as far as our Scrum meetings, but we have 2-week release cycles. If there are small things in between that, we've got a whole lot of standard changes now. So our change manager is happy. If we need to put in something quickly that's small, repeatable, standard changes, they can go in straight away. No or low impact potential to the business, new reports. I'm out of time. Sorry guys. All right. So what have we done? In essence, we put together 2 best practice methodologies or work practices and actually brought them together in a way that really works. We've got good prioritisation, we've got flexible services now that we can deliver to our customers, and they're happy. And in fact, we can't keep up with the feedback still. I may have to consider another developer in the future, or otherwise getting more partners in, which I know will make our partners happy. And it's cost effective. We're actually saving the business money in doing it too. We're keeping our environment simple and our systems as well. This is just some stats about where we are today. 20 forms. We've tried to be smart with forms. If it's going to the same service provider, such as our telco, anything you want from that telco, we're trying to build on that one form. And you choose an option and the rest of it populates with whatever you need. So we're trying to keep the volume down. It says 560 fulfillers there. We've got about 590 as of, I checked last night. 50% of our traffic to our service desk now comes through self-service, the rest through the phone. We've got 50 Create Now users, licenses in place, 4 custom modules and 7 interfaces, but there is a lot more happening. What's next? More maturity. We've got to be more partner friendly. Something we forget is not all our partners, our major outsourced partners who use this tool, are as able to adopt change as quickly as us. So we now have to build in that timing. We build a new workflow in a form and we said to them, great, here you go, you won't get it as an attachment anymore, but they weren't able to pick it up that quickly and we had to wait a month for them to communicate to all their people that this was going to happen this way. So we need to be more aware of partners, not just business stakeholders and IT groups, but our externals. And SME user groups is something we're going to set up. We want our user community, SMEs, to be more involved in the overall decision making because it's becoming so large that myself and my service management tools manager can't be holding all of that responsibilities. We have to do other things as well. So often for the big changes, the team comes to me and I think about all the modules and how they connect together and understanding the process and go, oh, there could be impact over there, you need to check with these guys. So we're saying let's actually bring together that SME user group into a regular forum and enable them to talk together and help to prioritise the big things. So we're actually putting that into practice in the next month or 2. I have done that somewhere else previously where it was effective. I'm hoping, although it's quite a different group, that it will work here. So my takeaways related to the 3 points I started with at the beginning. Decide early what your aspirations are. You don't have to rush it, but depending on what's possible in your organisation and what their appetite is, you'll either be an IT service management provider or you could be a business service management provider. And depending on what role and vision you have for your team and this tool set, depends on what you need to do in your team and what roles you're going to need to deliver that. It's not just a sysadmin or a developer, but there are going to be changes to other roles in your team as a result. And when you roll out to these business people, you need to be really aware that by changing the way they work, they're going to have to change roles and job descriptions. I now sit in big project meetings where they're going to use ServiceNow and talk to general managers of business departments and say, do you realise that once we implement this process for you, 60% of these people's role will be gone. These other people will be doing it via a mobility solution we're about to roll out. And therefore, you need to consider what are you going to do with their workloads. You could repurpose them because you're also going to introduce some new work tasks. But this is your decision and you need to think about that change. So we're actually helping them to realise those things so they can make the right decisions for their business as well. I'm sorry I've run over time, guys. And don't be afraid of change. Don't be afraid of agile, and you don't have to do it all. You can just pick the parts that work for you and still be effective. I apologise, I've run over time. Thank you, everyone. Are there any questions? Except everyone wants to go to the next thing. No? Yes?
You're a suspicious person's application. It's interesting that you say it was based on some problem and incident, right?
Really? Yeah.
Versus a problem. Did you leverage the sort of out-of-the-box problem and incident modules, or is it kind of a fully custom built?
Yeah, we did initially because originally they just wanted to pick up on the incident and the person, and then they said, oh, actually, if you can do that, we also want to be able to develop cases, which were problems, and then link multiple incidents and things to it. So we did start that way, but we always had it completely separated out and customised for them. Yeah. And then we've developed further from there and integrated to the other systems.
What is resolving a problem?
Resolving a problem? Oh, their statuses that they use. Well, some of them involve actually going to court cases and progress that way, and others they may investigate and find that it's not actually something wrong, it was just whatever behaviour on a day, and they close it off. Yeah. Sorry. That's all. Okay. Thank you, everyone.